Howdy, folks. I want to talk about high deductibles briefly. Specifically, I want to talk about maybe some of the pros and cons you haven't thought of, or in the one case for me, had never even heard of until recently. Um, so here's the thing. I've given this advice before. You'll find videos of me talking about how if you're an individual or a small group employer or an employer with less than 100 employees that for whatever reason can't self-insure your group health plan, you have to buy a fully insured health plan or maybe a level funded plan from a carrier. Um, Whenever you enter a financial transaction with an insurance company, you are going to lose. Remember, the idea is you're giving them a premium, you're giving them money to smooth out your risk, to cover unforeseen risks, and to smooth out the jumps and bumps in cash flow that you may not be able to stomach. So their job is to make money and to and they're really really good at it, right? So I mean, again, think about this. Like they're the largest lobby in the United States, they're the largest employer in the United States. It's like 1/5 of our entire economy. It is powered intensely with private equity and Wall Street, and you are entering into a transaction with what I would say is probably the most powerful, the most shrewd, the most sophisticated industry on the planet, and their job is to make money on you. So you're going to lose. That's the reality. The more insurance you have to buy, the more you're going to lose. Now, in any given year, of course, it can work out. You could have a heart attack. You could, whatever the case may be. Great, you can have a heart attack. You're a winner. But you can win in any given year. It's just that over any 5 to 10 year period, you are going to lose. So my advice to all individuals and small group employers, employers that are fully insured, buy as little insurance as you possibly can and then do the rest yourself, right? Set aside money, do whatever you can to self-insure everything you can. So a lot of times for an individual or a fully insured employer, that looks like a five, six, maybe even a $7,000 deductible with the highest out-of-pocket max they sell. And that's going to save you anywhere from 25 to 35, maybe even 40% on premium versus a zero or very low deductible plan where you're just giving money to that carrier. Now, people don't understand healthcare. I get it because the industry has worked incredibly hard for the last 75 years to keep prices as complicated and hidden as possible. That's changing. That information's getting out and prices are becoming more transparent, more available. It's a slow process. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not all going to become great healthcare shoppers overnight. I get that. Okay, so what's the advantage of a high deductible plan? Well, of course, lower premium. All right. So then, of course, the logic of health savings accounts, health reimbursement accounts, collectively known as consumer-driven health plans, CDHPs, have become popular since about 2005, 2006. And they've grown a little bit over time. So again, the idea there is we put in this $6,000 deductible, and then you as the employee can fund an account underneath that deductible to self-insure your care. Or your employer could actually fund that account depending on the situation. It's a great model for those who have to, either as an individual or a smaller employer, buy insurance. It's a great model. All right. The pro of that is you're not getting in bed with the most vicious profiteering industry on the planet and losing your shirt. I mean, these people that think, and I speak to highly intelligent people from time to time. Most of them get it, but from time to time, I speak to super intelligent people that think, well, no, I'm special. I need to buy low dollar insurance for X, Y, or Z reason. And look, if you're taking a really expensive medication or you're having a surgery or a child this year, that might be the case. But just to think like, no, my family's more accident prone, so we need to buy low dollar insurance. You're not going to win in that. That's like walking into a casino and thinking, I'm going to beat the house consistently, right? I mean, this is just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're going to lose. So I'm a huge proponent of high deductible health plans. However, this whole thing flips over when I start to talk about self-insurance, and particularly reference-based pricing or self-insuring without a network. This is different because with a self-funded health plan, let's just assume you're going to self-fund your health plan, self-insure your health plan as a larger employer. Again, we're not talking individuals now. And you're going to use a network, Cigna, Aetna, the Blues, United Healthcare, whomever. Well, now putting in the high deductible health plan makes a lot less sense in my mind because now we're not trying to minimize the insurance we're buying from an insurance company who's going to profit on every dollar of insurance we buy. Now, really, the only logic is I want to put in my employees' skin in the game. I want to make them better shoppers. I want to make them better consumers of healthcare. And here's the deal. The past 2 decades have shown us that overwhelmingly, people don't. People get confused, they get frustrated, they get angry, they don't understand healthcare. Even with all these transparency laws that are out, the healthcare industry, the momentum behind the oligopoly that I refer to as the cartel, the healthcare cartel, is to obfuscate and hide pricing and make it as challenging as possible. And really, what you're doing, if you're in a self-funded environment, is you're just frustrating your employees. So I get it if you philosophically, if you've got a group of executives, for example, that really want their HSA and want to be able to squirrel away those pre-tax dollars. I get it. If you have to have an HSA, I get it. We'll do it. But just know that the need or the desire to have a high deductible health plan when you are self-insured is pretty greatly ameliorated because we're now, because again, in my world, the overwhelming reason to do it is to buy as little insurance as possible. But if you're self-insured, you're already there, right? You're just buying stop loss. That's not going to kick in until you hit 100 or 200K as a specific deductible. So whether you have a $500, $1,000, or a $5,000 deductible to the individual has no bearing on the plan financing. It's only whether or not you want to try and force consumerism down the throat of your employee, which maybe you want to do that. Some of my clients do, most don't. But that's a personal choice. I get it. Like, I understand there's pros and cons of this. Okay, now let's get to the fun part. There are two other reasons where high deductible plans are problematic, and they're not intuitive. One of them is kind of shocking to me, actually. It's come up this year in my life. So let's start with one. I think the one that's maybe easier to get your head around. This came up for me a few years ago when I was meeting with an executive of a medical concierge service that works with reference-based pricing plans. So they work with employees. They try and help employees set their first appointment. They make sure that if the employee gets pushback or has questions when they're at the doctor's office, they're on the phone, they're there to explain the plan, how the provider is going to get reimbursed, whether it's a individual doctor or a facility, right? So this lady owns and is a CEO of a concierge service. And I had an employer who wanted to just basically take the two plans they had. They had a PPO, a traditional PPO with like a $500 deductible, and then they had an HSA with a $5,000 deductible. They wanted to move both of those plans over to a reference-based pricing program with no network. So pure reference-based pricing, open access, go anywhere you want, no network. Okay. What we learned in this process through the research end was that you significantly can impede employee access to healthcare with that high deductible plan on a reference-based pricing program, because with pure RBP, again, this is not using a network. If you're using a network for providers, what I'm about to tell you isn't relevant. But if you're pure RBP with no network, you have a situation where you don't have a contract with that doctor, right? So that doctor, if they haven't worked with RBP before, or they don't know RBP, that they are trying to figure out whether or not they want to work with the plan. They want to accept a reimbursement. They want to do this. Now, if it's a $5,000 deductible, the front desk or the billing person that ultimately is going to make the decision on whether or not to treat this patient or to schedule this appointment is going to have in their back of their head, okay, I got to collect the first $5,000 out of Johnny Sixpack here. That was her word, not mine. I just thought it was funny, so I use it. But, Johnny Sixpack's here. He got off of work. He might be a contractor. He showed up with some tears in his jeans, his lunch pail. He's a little bit disheveled looking. He's got maybe a tobacco wad in his mouth here. Um, and the provider is thinking to themselves, not only now am I going to work with a plan I've never heard of, right? This reference-based pricing plan, which only maybe 4% of employers are doing now, but I have to collect the first $5,000 out of Johnny Sixpack, who doesn't look like a great credit risk to me. No, I don't want to do it. Whereas if the alternative is this is a low dollar plan, it's a $10 copay, um, you're much more likely to get the person to say, yeah, I'll take that risk. It's going to come from the employer. All I got to get is $10 out of Johnny Sixpack. No problem. Now you say, well, how is that different than if the employer has Anthem or United Healthcare or Blue Shield or Blue Cross or Cigna? Um, well, in those cases, there's a contract between the provider and the insurer. And one of the stipulations in that contract is that you, the provider, will agree to treat the patient irrespective of whether or not they're on a high deductible plan, a medium deductible plan, or a low deductible plan. In other words, you're agreeing with your carrier when you enter into that agreement that you won't discriminate based upon the plan style they have within that carrier, as long as you're, of course, taking new patients. You can't say no. In other words, if you're taking new patients and you have a contract with Purple Cross, you can't say no to a new Purple Cross patient coming in because you don't like the particular plan they have. However, when it's a reference-based price open access plan, you don't have that contract. You're trying to make sure you sweeten the pot so that the doctor wants to work with you. And high deductible health plans, doctors' offices don't like. They just don't like them because you turn the doctor's office into a collection agency. Now they're not just billing the TPA and getting a nice prompt professional reimbursement. They have to bill the TPA, right? They can't just collect a $10 or a $20 copay at the door because they gotta bill the TPA, or they gotta wait for the EOB and then bill the patient as well. So you literally end up with a situation where you double the work of the provider because now they've got to collect money from both Johnny Sixpack and from the TPA. Whereas if you have a low deductible plan, friction is reduced. You're not forcing your provider to become a collection agency, and they just have to collect from the plan. Okay. So it was an interesting nuance to me that I hadn't thought of, honestly. This was a few years back, and I thought that's pretty cool. Now, interesting, right? And it's another beautiful thing with reference-based pricing, because the bottom line is when you put in RBP, you're going to reduce the cost of the plan, total cost of the plan, 20 to 40%. It's really more like 25 to 40%. So if I'm going to reduce the cost of your plan, let's say 30%, then let's take 10% of those savings, shove them right back in the plan, and put in a way better plan design. And then let's just save you 20% on the dollars, right? And that's the way we do this normally. Is we whatever you've got in place, I want to get your deductible down. I want to get your deductible down under 1,000. I want to make it, and I want to make office visits do not apply to the deductible. They're just copays, because you want to sweeten the pot. You want to say to your employees, look, we're going to ask you to do something a little new and different here. However, it's going to be better. You're going to have more coverage. Yes, we're sorry, the first 3 to 6 months on this plan, we're going to have to answer questions to your doctor's office. We're going to have to get through this learning curve. However, once we do, you're going to pay less and you're going to get less pushback when you go to the doctor, because ultimately they're going to like what we're doing better than having to work with the cartel. Okay? All right, so we knew that. We've known that one. Here's the latest one. I had somebody tell me earlier in the year that they will delay. Okay, let me just say. I had a practitioner tell me that she worked at a large medical group where when they saw high deductible health plan coming in and maybe this person they needed a scan, they needed some kind of an MRI or a CT scan, they needed some expensive, more than just a simple scan, that the health system, their scheduling office, systematically as a strategy was pushed. Now this was true whether you came in and you were on a PPO, a recognizable network, or you were open access RVP. They were systematically delaying those schedulings to later in the year, as late in the year as possible, in fact, as long as it wasn't totally urgent, right? And we could push your MRI out to December, they would do it. And I thought, what the hell? The logic was Johnny Six Pack. We're back to Johnny now with his ripped jeans and he's got a little smell of alcohol on his breath and a dip in his mouth here. Johnny Six Pack, he's got a $6,000 deductible. I don't think Johnny Six Pack has $6,000, so I'm going to push this scan as late in the year as I can so that I increase the odds some other healthcare provider has had to go through the collection game with Johnny, and Johnny hopefully has hit his deductible and or even better, his out-of-pocket max. So in other words, I'm going to delay his care as much as I can to the last part of the calendar year so that it's easier for me to collect from him. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like I'm a conspiracy guy, right? I'm a pretty, I've been behind the curtain for too long in this industry. I've been behind the shield, and I've seen how dirty and wrong and horrible some entities can behave. And when I say that, I mean insurers, I mean PBMs, I mean hospitals. There's great people out there, but whew, there's some real bad ones. And I thought, even I, as somebody who, it's pretty hard for anybody to think less lowly of the industry than I do. Even I thought, can this be a thing, right? And then I heard it. Stacey Richter on her fantastic podcast recently, and I'll link it in the notes here along with this video. Stacey Richter in the Relentless Health Value podcast was talking to Dr. Kristen Dickerson, and I believe Dr. Dickerson is from Texas. And Stacey commented that she was just at a conference where there were no less than 3 sessions at the conference on how do we get patients to pay their bills. Because of all of the proliferation of high deductible health plans, practitioners and providers are pulling their hair out, right? Then she recounted a conversation she had with Dr. Dickerson, and Dr. Dickerson explained, oh yeah, there are absolutely some clinical organizations out there that are pushing care as late in the calendar year as possible in hopes that somebody else has had to go through the collections game to get cheddar out of Johnny Sixpack. And I just thought, wow. I mean, it's got to be more common than I thought, right? So I just want to share that with you because I've done this for 23 years now. Like, and before that, I did it part-time for 10 years. I learn stuff like this every week in this industry. It's incredible. It's incredible what's going on in healthcare. The good news is there's positive change coming, reference-based pricing, all of the cash pay stuff we've got going on, direct primary care, the huge proliferation of transparent PBMs that are not the big 3 that are doing a really good job. There's good news coming, and it's getting better every month. It really is. But man, you cannot be cynical enough in this industry. It is wild to me. Have a great day.